Welcome to the Max Bet Podcast, a podcast dedicated to everything gaming. I'm Landon Jones, here with Mike McKiskey. Let's get started. We're going to put it, I don't know that I want to put it on here, but
you're recording, so figure it out. What is up, man?
I don't want to put it on. Hey, what's going on, Mike? How you doing, brother?
I'm good, bro. I've been just
what do you want?
Just hang it. We're doing it. No, honestly, I spent the weekend dreaming of ways to spend $6 billion because I don't have $6 billion.
Why?
But I was like, well, because the Las Vegas Sands just sold for $6 billion, right? So I'm thinking like at some level, there's going to be a few people that make a lot of money on that, right? Like I'm assuming it's not just one guy. I mean, even when Adelson owned it, he wouldn't have been the only guy getting paid. But I'm just sitting there going, what if you had $6 billion? What if you had $1 billion? Like, what would you spend it on? Like, I know you're always asking people what their yacht's called. Is that your first purchase? You go out and get a yacht, or what are you doing with that money?
Oh, that's a big question. What do you spend $1 billion on? The first thing I would probably do is just give it to someone that understands money, because I don't. I would just be like, hey, sir, here's this. Make sure I don't lose it all within a week. Thank you.
Yeah.
That would be my first task.
It's so funny, man. So my immediate thought was, I want to buy an island. So then I started down the rabbit hole on the internet of like, how could I possibly go buy an island? Turns out not that hard. You could actually, there's islands for sale all over the place. Even ones with like plumbing and pre-existing real estate and stuff that you could own. It's like $100 million, which obviously today is a lot of money. But when you're sitting there, if you had the 6 or even $1 billion, you go, it's not bad. Just break off 10% of that, buy yourself an island. I don't know. Could be a good way to go.
Wonder what island maintenance costs are. I'm sure it's not. I bet there's so many taxes that come with that.
Maybe. Yeah, I'm sure I didn't go that far into it. Yeah, I'm just laughing. But I'm like, you can't have an HOA, right? Because it's like you own the damn island. So if you want to let the palm trees grow a little more, you want to not cut the grass, like it's your island.
The HOA might be the U.S. Coast Guard, and they might be charging you.
That's what so then it said it's funny. So then somebody was obviously in the thread. So I was pretty down the Reddit rabbit hole. They're like, well, what if I wanted to buy my own island and make it my own country? Right. So then there was a whole thing about that, but it's like not likely. They said, but if you had the money, you could probably do it in a really poor country. So if like a really poor, corrupt country had an island, you could just pay them off and go, hey, we're our own country now. Grant us our freedom. The problem with that is if anyone finds out and sends their Navy, it would take like 4 guys on the smallest possible Navy ship to just overthrow your island. And now you're a member of like whoever, Great Britain or whoever the conqueror would be. So
they just throw a message in a bottle from their raft. They're like, we own you now.
You want to shoot back? Cause we got, 12 guys is all we needed. We didn't have to really take this that seriously. So yeah, anyway, so I don't think I'll ever own an island, but I was just laughing because, Mohegan is on the strip now or soon will be. And big price tag to get there. 4
guys approach your island with super soakers and take it over with just water guns.
It's like, yeah, that's how we do it now. The new maritime pirate law. It's like, we don't want to kill anybody. It's all just super soaker battle. So who can hang out the longest? Yeah. Geez.
Well, cool. Well, who do we have this week?
Man, prepare to get inspired, my friend. We got Brooks Pierce, COO and president of Inspired Gaming, which admittedly, I didn't really know much about. I think, I knew he was there. I'm friends with their one of their heads of marketing, Colleen. So I knew she was there. So it was like, yeah, I knew they're some serious company because those two have been in the biz for a while, and you take them seriously when they go somewhere. But I was like, I don't really know what they do. Like if you would have quizzed me 2 weeks ago before I started looking into it, getting ready to talk to Brooks, I was like, I don't know. Assuming they were a smaller game dev house, but that's not even close.
I've never had interactions with Brooks either, but I know a handful of people that know him well. And those handful of people are successful, and they have nothing bad to say about that guy. They're just all positive feedback, and just say he's a great leader, a great mentor, just a great human. So I'm excited to dive in with him and kind of learn a little bit more about Brooks. So
yeah, same.
I think for the interview.
Yeah. Anytime you respect somebody and then that person goes, hey, you know who I respect? Brooks. And that, like, to your point, like I asked a few people and they're all like, yeah, man, he's a hammer. So it's like, all right, well, cool. We're stoked to be able to chat with him. So
we're going to have a little shorter intro this week. Shout out to our sponsors. As always, EKG and Gaming Analytics. We've said a lot about them in the past. Can't say enough good things about those 2 companies. So if you guys haven't checked them out, we'll have more information coming on those 2 companies in the future, but we appreciate you guys for sponsoring the podcast. And yeah, man, should we just knock this out and jump into Brooks Pierce?
Let's give the people what they want, my friend. Well, thanks for making time for us. We appreciate you jumping on.
Yeah, no problem. It's when most of your employees are in the UK, the day starts very early. And right about now, well, in the old days, these guys would be in the pub, but now they're probably just drinking at home. But yeah, so the afternoons are much better for me.
So how we're just going to have like a pretty relaxed interview. Obviously, you've listened to some of our recent episodes.
Yeah, I binged.
You binged? Yeah. Which one was your favorite?
Nice. Well, I hate to say this. I mean, because, some of the, kind of so many of the people that you guys have talked to, I know.
Yeah.
Well, LG obviously cracks me up no matter what. I mean, the fact that he was, out, all the time, and then he makes it back to, his place, and his office is in a wine cellar. I mean, that's really kind of a microcosm of his life. And then, I worked with Matt for a couple of years, and he's very smooth and comes across very polished. And so, yeah, I mean, kind of Buddy Frank. I mean, they're all kind of interesting guys. I think it's a really cool concept you guys have come up with.
Yeah, appreciate that.
No doubt. Yeah, they're all fun to do, which is nice. I feel like, it's fun. We get into it and it's like, man, you learn a lot. Like you talk to some of these guys, you go, that's pretty, I don't know that about you, or I didn't know that about like your side of the biz or whatever whatever the learning is. So yeah, it's been fun to kind of keep this thing moving.
Yeah, I bet it has.
But you were saying you had an interesting story about maybe how you got into gaming. So what, it's maybe a little unconventional.
Yeah,
what brought you into the biz?
Well, everybody says that they kind of stumbled into it, and I was different. I was kind of born into it. So do you know what a tote system is?
Tote? No.
Landon? No.
No. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, so if you've been to Del Mar, if you live in San Diego, I'm sure you've been to Del Mar. At least I hope you've been to Del Mar.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I've been there.
Yeah. Opening day at Del Mar is the best place in the planet to be. But anyway, the tote system is the central system that calculates the odds and the payoffs. And when you go up to bet on the machine, the tote board. So anyway, how I got into the business was when I was a kid. My father was the CEO of a company called Amtote. And so when I was like 15 years old, I had to go work in the stock room and count all the screws and bolts and, stuff like that. And I eventually graduated to being able to go out to the racetrack to fix machines and, kind of get out of the stock room. And then when I graduated college, I kind of was one of these young headstrong guys that said, I'm not going to go work in the business of my father. I don't want to be the boss's son. Right. So I went out and was doing my thing. And then unfortunately, so my father was CEO of a company called Autotope, which I'll tell you about because that's the predecessor to Scientific Games, and got unfortunately one of these, 6 months to live pancreatic cancer diagnoses. So it was kind of like, all right, enough of standing on the sidelines. It's time for you to get in the game. So myself and Lauren Wheel, who you probably know, who's at one point was chairman and CEO of Scientific Games, we literally came into Autotote. He was on the board. I was in a completely different business. But we came into Autotote within kind of a month of one another. I always say it was kind of an arranged marriage. But we kind of came in January of 91 into what was, a gaming technology company, but specific to racing. And then over the course of the next kind of 25 years, we built it up from a company that was doing roughly 15 or 20 million in revenues to what ultimately became Scientific Games. We bought Scientific Games, I think about 10 or 15 years into the process and actually took their name. So I've been around it for a long time.
That's wild. I didn't know that story where how Scientific Games was created. That's pretty
I was
cool.
going to ask, what were they doing before? Like, was Scientific Games always kind of the land-based side, and then you acquired them and brought them into racing, or were they racing historically? I've never heard
No. They're not racing at all. So the sequence was, so we started in the racing business, and one of the things we tried to figure out kind of what are our core assets and what do we do well. And high transaction processing, where you've got to do a lot of things with terminals and systems and so on and so forth. So we said, well, we should get into the lottery business. So we acquired a business that was in the lottery business, and we were doing the system side of things, and we wanted to get bigger. And at that point, Scientific Games was a very big scratch-off ticket printing business, but they had a very small system side of the business. So we decided that, putting those two entities together would make a lot of sense. They had scratch-off tickets and the same customers. We had systems. So we ended up buying Scientific Games, took their name because we love the name. And then ultimately, we continued to build that business and then decided to get bigger in gaming because one of the things we had done at iGames was get into licensed games. So, scratch off Monopoly tickets and Wheel of Fortune and all that kind of stuff. So we said, well, what are we good at? We're good at these things and licensing and making terminals and software. So what should we get bigger in? We decided to get bigger in gaming. And then I think probably to everyone's surprise, we ended up buying WMS for, I think, $1.5 billion. So we, kind of started from a small little company to all of a sudden we're buying, big gaming companies for $1.5 billion. So it's amazing what can happen.
This is before computers, right? I mean, when you guys were calculating odds on the races, this is before computers. So were those all hand calculated and then put into the system?
We were definitely computerized by then. But it's funny. Actually, again, this is kind of the way the world used to be. It got automated, but before you used to have to go to the racetrack. You had to go to one window to bet and a different window to cash. So when my father, one of the big inventions he had in the racing business and his company was to create this sell cash system. So you could go to the same window and make your bets and cash your bets, which now seems kind of crazy. Like who couldn't do that? But back in the late 70s, that was pretty revolutionary because at that point, the racetracks, their biggest expense were tellers. So kind of overnight, 50% of the tellers went away because you did it all in one window. So, but no, by the time I got into the business, it was completely computerized and all done that way.
Nice. I think Landon pictured you in the back room with a sharp pencil looking out going, all right, we got the 4 horse is going to win this one.
That's the way it was done way back when.
Yeah.
But I mean, it gave a good base for kind of understanding, systems, technology, and kind of what drove people to what attracted them. So it was a good baseline of understanding to get into kind of a broader aspect of the gaming business for sure.
How did your dad get into that business? So you followed your dad's footsteps, and how did you
that's crazy. Trailblazer move. Yeah.
Well, you want to hear something that's really crazy is, so he got recruited into it he ran a company called, again, this is going way back, called Servamation, which was in like the food service business. So it had nothing to do with racing, nothing to do with technology, but he got headhunted away and got recruited into the business. So after I graduated from college, the company that I first started working with is a big company on the East Coast called Airmark, which happens to be in food service, business dining.
That's a huge company now, right?
Yeah, huge. They do coffee services, uniforms, everything. So I worked for them, and it was a great experience working for a big company. But then, when my father got sick and I had to come in, so it's just it wasn't necessarily planned out this way, but our career paths kind of overlaid one another. So I went from food service to gaming technology. But anyway,
Wow.
just kind of it's a good thing to I mentor a lot of college students, and what you try and say to them is like, find a business that's growing, go to work for something that people like. My kids, one works for LinkedIn, one works for Twitter. They didn't even exist when I was growing up. So, find a business that's growing and latch onto it.
No doubt. Yeah. Cause then you'll be sitting at the top when it's like, holy, Twitter now is massive. I don't know when they joined. LinkedIn, same thing. LinkedIn might be growing faster, I think, especially with all the jobs people need now. But yeah, that's great advice. Get in on the early stages and try to call your shot.
Yeah, well, it's kind of self-serving because you want to get your kids off the payroll as fast as you can. So, I don't have any problems. I'm pretty sure that, Twitter and LinkedIn are going to make their payroll.
They should. Yeah, I'm on them. I'm a user. So then you talk about coming inside games and the racing, right? And then obviously that evolved and you were senior at everything. It feels like I was reading your bio, chief of, you name it. But then I think from there, you kind of found your way over to Inspired. And was that a similar thing, following your own advice, going, hey, this business is growing and I want to be a part of it? Or after kind of dominating the bigger, more traditional companies, I think a lot of people are like, what's Inspired? Like, no, I don't know if a lot of people heard of it before. Then you went there and it was like, oh, well, that's the Brooks Pierce company. So like, what motivated that?
Yeah. Well, it's far from the Brooks Pierce company.
Sure.
There's a lot of people that make up Inspired, but so the sequence of events is, so after I left iGames, actually, with one of the other people that you'd interviewed, Gavin, when he came in as the CEO of iGames, I was a legacy iGames guy and he wanted to have his own people in, which I totally understood. Yep. And as it works, I guess one of the nice things about the gaming industry is when you go sit on the sidelines, generally people pay you to do that. Yeah. So in the intervening period, I got recruited to be the managing director of Aristocrat, moved out to Vegas. And I, talk about catching the wave. Aristocrat was, I came in kind of right before Lightning Link came about. So, wow. My numbers or our team's numbers really look fantastic. Yeah. But, anybody probably could have ridden the Lightning Link wave. So I did that for a couple of years and it was phenomenal. Great experience. A lot of great people, tons of people that are still in the industry. But after a couple of years, I kind of felt like we had done everything that I wanted to do. My wife and family were back on the East Coast. So sure. I wanted to get back to the East Coast. So in the intervening time period, so I knew Inspired because when we were at Scientific Games, they were our principal competitor in the UK. So we had looked at buying them a couple of times and kind of knew the business seriously. So in the intervening period, when I was at Aristocrat, Lorne, the guy I mentioned before, had a SPAC before anybody even knew what a SPAC was. Right. So he was way ahead of his time. He did his like 4 years ago. So with a SPAC, he bought Inspired. So when I left Aristocrat, he gave me a call and said, hey, why don't you come work for me at Inspired? And I said, well, look, I need to decompress a little bit from the roller coaster Aristocrat experience. I'll tell you what, how about I come consult for you for a while? He said, that's great. Come help me figure this thing out. So I did that for kind of 8 or 9 months and became, kind of more and more enamored of the business, got to spend a lot of time. I felt like it was kind of like, living with somebody before you marry them. So I got to meet, all the team and got to really understand what was kind of what could drive the business. They got to know me and what my expectations would be. So the board and Lorne asked me to come be president and COO, I think as May of 2018. And then, we've been kind of ramping it up since then. I mean, for Lorne and I think we kind of look at it as, we took a small company and built it up into iGames, and we feel like we kind of have one more of these.
Wow. What was most compelling for you working and consulting for Inspired that made you want to jump on board full time?
Well, I think it helps. I think it helps when the guy you're going to work with, you have a 25-year history with, and that makes it easier. So, I know what his expectations are, and, we worked very well together, and I really, enjoy working with him. But, a couple of things. Number one, I'm sure we'll talk about this. They have a product that is huge everywhere in the world, but North America in virtual sports. And I just saw, I can't say I saw, the PASPA thing happening when it did, but I just figured that virtual sports would be a huge product on a worldwide basis, and particularly in North America. So that was kind of the original appeal, but they're huge in gaming, but it's all outside North America. So when I came on board, having the biggest, market in the world in North America, being a complete greenfield for Inspired, and I knew what their products were like, and and how successful they were in other parts of the world. And I said, well, look, there's no reason we can't translate this success that we've had in Europe and bring it to the North American market.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was looking at the site and kind of looking at virtual sports. I'm going, what is this niche? Does it fill? And obviously it's successful, because in Europe and other places, sports betting legally has been forever. It feels like, it's not new.
Sure.
It's new here, but I look at it, I go, is there a market for both? I'm assuming obviously there is, given the success you're seeing, but is that a training ground for sports bettors? Is that just some women, how does that fit in? And like, who's playing virtual sports?
Yeah. Well, I get asked that all the time.
Yeah.
So and it's, it's an excellent question. And I think the way I position virtual sports is, look, it's complementary to real sports. It's not going to overtake real sports. That's just not going to happen. But, there's certainly at certain times of the day, there's no real content in sports. The action is very quick. The results are coming. So it's kind of almost like the slot machine buzz, because you're getting your results, kind of every 90 seconds instead of waiting, 3 hours for a game. So people generally, when they go into like a betting shop in the UK or Greece, or, hopefully they'll be doing it more and more in the States, they may bet 2 or 3 basketball games, but in the meantime, while they're waiting for the results, they'll either be doing some in-play betting on sports, or they'll be playing virtuals. And it's got an appeal. It's also got an appeal to a lottery style player, because you're not handicapping. This is all random number generated. So what it really is it's like the spin of a slot machine, but the outcome is with a cool virtual sports game. So like if you went on the website and looked at the graphics, I mean, it's amazing. We did, this year, just for example, just to show you the kind of caliber of the graphics. So we did 2 virtual horse races. We did the Kentucky Derby and the Melbourne Cup, because both of them weren't run this year.
Right.
They did a virtual event of ours and bet on them. And people, so in the Derby example, we took the 13 Triple Crown winning horses over history, ran our algorithms through, and then showed a race that people watched on, NBC. So virtual sports is becoming, kind of mainstream.
Interesting. Okay. So I don't think I understood this at all. So when I was reading it, just to say it, right? So like when I was looking at it, I figured it was like, okay, like we're Knights fans here in Vegas. So like the hockey game's playing, virtual sports was in effect. I'm going to bet on that game, but for fake money, for monopoly money instead of real money. But what I'm actually hearing is, well, no, not even close to that.
No.
It's a simulated sports experience, Kentucky Derby, etc. that you're betting on, and you just get outcomes all day that are just totally outside the world of real life sporting events.
100%. So you can't handicap them. It's all a random number event, a random number. So let's take football, American football, as my British colleagues would call it. All of us call it football. They call it American football.
We get it.
But so we'll show, it's almost like the red zone. So what we'll do is we'll show snippets of highlights and how we actually make the game. So we literally had, whether it was football or basketball, so we dress these guys up and do, full CG, filming of people playing football. And then we make the virtual product out of that. Same thing with basketball.
That's wild.
So I always laugh when I tell people that, we filmed the basketball game in Wales, and trying to find 10 guys in Wales that can dunk is not the easiest thing in the world.
Good luck.
But so we do a motion capture of people that you've seen, like you've probably seen, like for Madden, and something like that, where they're literally wearing the outfit with all the sensors.
Dots,
So we literally do a motion capture of that, and then turn it into clips, and then we piece this together, and we make a random number generator pick the outcomes. So we've done a deal. Perfect examples. We did a deal with the NFL alumni, because I happen to believe that the people that are betting now have as much affinity for people that have retired than they do with guys that are active players. So you'll be sitting there watching a virtual NFL game, and it'll be like Terry Bradshaw throwing to Lynn Swann, but it's all virtual. But you're betting on the outcome, and we try and do a bunch of different creative bets. You can obviously do total points, over under, spreads. But we'll have a sequence where we'll have 8 games going at once, and you'll just be seeing highlights, and it's like a parlay. So it's kind of a cool diet. It's a pretty cool little thing, I think.
Yeah. I'm super curious. So the sports betting market is opening up in the US, as we all know.
Yeah.
And you guys are running virtual sports. So how do you guys educate players about what virtual sports is to an audience that has no idea what it is? Like, how do you start implementing it into it? Yeah. I mean, we do this for days.
It's not just the $1 million question. That's the $1 billion question.
Yeah.
Because in the markets where we're biggest, so here's a perfect example. So when we went live in Italy for the first time, within 6 months, Italy went from like 0 to $1.5 billion market. Greece went from like 0 to $800 million market. The US is going to be an education process. So we launched our first US product was with the Pennsylvania Lottery. So we launched a football game and what they call Derby Cash, so a horse racing game. And, we lost kind of half the audience, because people, when they were watching our virtual football, so think about if you're like in a Buffalo Wild Wings or something in Philly, and our game looks so realistic, people just didn't even actually know they were supposed to bet on it. They just thought it was like another event. Whereas horse racing, they actually said, okay, well, horse racing is a betting sport.
For sure.
So our horse racing virtual numbers in Pennsylvania have gone just like that. We're now in the process of trying to do the next version of football. And we really do have to educate the players. So it's a very normal thing in the UK, Italy, Greece, all throughout Europe. But it's from a standing start in North America. So educating players is probably the biggest hurdle that we have.
Yeah, it makes sense. And when you threw out those numbers, about $1,800,000,000, those are virtual sports numbers. You're saying the market for virtual sports grew. That's fascinating.
That's the amount of money that's getting bet on that. I mean, literally from standing start,
just from the hop. Yeah, that's wild. What I start thinking of when you told me you lined up all like the past legends of racing and did that race, I'm going, wouldn't it be cool to take, and try to do a virtual MJ LeBron debate, right? Because you always get these eras. To your point about the old school, you're going, we have our boss is MJ till he dies, right? And he might be right. I don't have enough in it, but there's very passionate arguments on either side. And, well, no, the guys in the 70s were they were the ones and they were tough, and these guys are not. And it's like, well, maybe, but maybe there's a platform you go, let's take all that info and drop it in, and maybe it's probably has to be handicapped a little bit, but you're like, how do you settle that? If nothing else, it'd be fun.
No, you're right on. I mean, so in that race, the Kentucky Derby race, so the 13 Triple Crown winners. So you can imagine, you guys probably don't have to know that much about horse racing, but probably the horse you would assume is the number one horse of all time is Secretariat.
That's the only one I was going to know.
That. So as we were running through the algorithms, and we couldn't tell anyone who was going to win the race because we just didn't want anybody to know that. And I'm sitting there, so they wouldn't even tell me. And I'm sitting there, just please make it Secretariat, because everybody's going to think it's bullshit if Secretariat doesn't win. So as I'm watching the race. And, it's like War Admiral and Citation and these horses from the 20s. And I'm like, there's no way they're going to beat Secretariat. Yeah. But thankfully, the algorithm ultimately came through and Secretariat won, in the last, 10 yards of the race. Close. But to your point, I think the appeal of some of people like watching things that they can relate to and, bring back memories. So the NFL alumni games, I happen to be an Eagles fan, so I like seeing Bill Berge take the head off some guy coming across the middle. That's the kind of stuff that I like. So I think ultimately, the current players, that's a whole different licensing dynamic. But for the retired players, for us it was great because it also, from Lauren and I's background with the lottery, a lot of what we do is to help causes. I mean, that's what the lottery industry is all about. So when we pitched the NFL alumni, we said, look, we want to divert, and help generate for you guys money to help healthcare for retired NFL players. So we try and make this a business that's also doing some good. So they jumped on it and said, it's great. So now we've got, you go on Bet365 in, Romania, and you can bet, Terry Bradshaw playing with Franco Harris.
Yeah, I love
That's wild.
And then is this classified? So because it's real betting, right? So it's virtual sports, but it's real betting. So is it classified under sports betting approvals, or is it more casino because it's RNG? Like, how does that get approved as you're making your way?
Good question. And you guys would know every jurisdiction is different. And some jurisdictions were regulated as a sport. In Vegas, we have some virtual horse racing in Vegas, and that's a sport. In Jersey, it's a slot product. Under the same regs, but we go through, GLI approvals and kind of everything you have to do in the gaming business. But it's a huge business on a worldwide basis, just not huge yet in North America, but stay tuned. Hopefully it will be.
Yeah.
What is the relationship with you guys in the casino, right? So are you guys launching the virtual sports in the sports book, or is it strictly on your cell phone? And if so, are you putting it on like a white label app? Like if San Manuel Casino had its own, casino app, and then they could go virtual sports. Like, what's the relationship you guys have with brick and mortar properties?
So we do both. But, for us, most of kind of our DNA is in what I would call distributed gaming. So large numbers of locations with fewer devices. So we'll have it in casinos, but most of the play, again, that's why the lottery is probably a very good channel for us, because in Pennsylvania you can buy a virtual sports product in 9,000 retail locations, and what they've done is they've added it into sports bars because lottery had never really cracked into the sports bar market. So lottery is obviously a natural channel. In terms of the casino world, like a perfect example is New Jersey, which is about to go live with MGM with this product we call VPP, Virtual Plug and Play. So when you go on the BetMGM, Borgata website, you will be able to see 14 different sports, virtual sports. So it'll be a tab, just like iGaming, a slot drop down, there'll be a virtual sport drop down. So we're already live with a few customers in New Jersey, and it's crazy. I mean, like, who would have bet? I would look at results from like Bet365, and there'd be days where cricket would be the highest played virtual sport in New Jersey. Like, who the hell plays cricket in New Jersey?
Yeah.
But somebody does.
Yeah.
So Landon, to answer your question, in an ideal world, most of our growth would be online.
Yeah.
That's on an app, people they have access to it just like they're betting sports. So literally, when they're betting a sport and they want to play something in between, they can just play a virtual game, right alongside. But it does have a component for, in the retail market as well. We'd just probably be like, if you were to, let's say you were in the Caesar Sportsbook in Vegas, it might have a screen or two.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah,
could you link that to esports? So video gaming, almost virtual video game sports as well, as we kind of scale this business? Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm kind of the generation that I don't really fully get esports. I mean, I get it and I see the numbers. But the answer to that is, we're having discussions with a lot of different companies that see that as just it's kind of another channel. So I think there's a cool future for that.
That would be my thought, is like trying to figure out in 20 years, what would this business look like, and how much could you expand it, and what different technologies could help really launch it into a new orbit. And I'm sitting there thinking the market for esports is massive, right? So how do you tap into that? You look at, and don't quote me on this, but 28 million, 26 million people watch the Super Bowl.
Right.
They tune in to watch the Super Bowl, but esports competitions, 100 million people tune in, and it's happening on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
So it's like, how can you tap into that market? And that's where my head went. So thank you.
Well, there you go. Why don't maybe you should be our liaison to the esports world, and you can make it happen.
I'm in. I'm ready. AGS. Just kidding.
So then I was reading, so the virtual sports thing, I didn't even realize we were getting into. That's fascinating. Like, I'm really, like, now I'm looking forward to go figure out where I can play it here in town and go, all right, let's check this thing out.
Yeah.
The other thing I noticed that stood out for me when I was looking over kind of the Inspired, there's two other things, but first, like, you guys do a lot of leisure games. So like arcade style, right? Is that just an homage to how you started, or like, is that a big business?
No, it's not an homage to how we started, because we actually acquired it. So we bought last, I guess it was like October, November of 2019. We bought Novamatics, UK business. Okay. So for us, part of that was the leisure business, but UK. So basically we're in gaming and all the betting shop, not all the betting shops, but our biggest customers are William Hill, Betfred, Paddy Power. So we wanted to take, and all of our stuff is server-based gaming, which I know is kind of a faux pas in the States, but in the rest of the world, server-based gaming is very common. So pretty much everything we do is downloadable and change games on the fly, et cetera, et cetera. Because like when you're in a betting shop and you only have 4 machines, you got to freshen them up kind of on a regular basis. So anyway, one of the things that we wanted to do was we wanted to get into different channels. So when we bought Novamatics business, they were in the pub business in the UK. They're in what they call motorway services, which are like kind of like, I don't know, the UK version of truck stops. And then this thing they call holiday parks, which are, for lack of a better term, around the seashore of the UK. People come and kind of park their caravans there. And then there's arcades. Yeah. Some part of the arcades are real money gambling, like slot machines like we do. But the other half of the arcades are, what you would imagine, cranes and pushers and virtual reality stuff. So we kind of acquired our way into that business, but it's a big chunk of the company, and actually a big part of what we see, going forward. Now, we've obviously, you want to talk about a business that's been crushed by COVID. Oh, for sure. Everything in that business counts on footfall, and we've pretty much been shut down almost the entire time we've owned the business. But, hopefully this summer, if everybody gets through, COVID and comes out on the right side, which we all of us hope happens, we're looking for big things. And it's ironic in the UK, because people just aren't going to be traveling as much to continental Europe with everything going on, like the staycation, as they call it, bookings in the UK are like going through the roof. because people have been locked down for years. So,
Absolutely.
we're going to be handing out all kinds of, little prizes and toys. And so, got the kids market and then obviously the adult market. So for a guy who comes from the gaming world, it's kind of a cool, different thing. So like Lauren and I went to a show in Orlando, and it's kind of like the G2E of amusements. Yeah. So you're going through and you're watching like air hockey games and virtual reality. I mean, imagine going to a show where you can literally buy a roller coaster in the show.
That's pretty rad.
That's how do you take that demo, right? Like I could show you a slot game. You're like, is there a simulated roller coaster? You just take their word that it's fun.
Is it okay if I just put this on my card and just take it with me?
Does he take credit? Yeah, that'd be good. Just load it in the truck. That's hilarious.
I'm curious. You said that there was a huge hit, obviously, with COVID and the arcade business. But what kind of increases did you guys see in the virtual sports betting to your business? Like, so people staying at home, wanting to play online. Did you guys see a huge increase in your volume?
Yeah. So yes. Yeah. I mean, huge. And really probably even more so in our, what I guess the term now everybody uses is iGaming, but basically taking all our slot content and putting it online. So when I came a few years ago, and, I have to give Aristocrat credit. I mean, one of the things Aristocrat is all about is they are just, obsessively focused on products, and it's all about the game. So, my poor CPO at Inspired has heard, me for like 3 years, bending his ears, like, don't get distracted by anything other than just make great games. You make great games and everything else will take care of itself. Trust me. Don't worry about getting the games out. Don't worry about it. Just focus all your energy on making great games and everything will take care of itself. And to his credit, he's done that. So our kind of iGaming business, which you guys would know because you guys are in AGS in the space as well. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a huge, huge potential in North America. I just see more and more states going on to this. So our iGaming revenue, when everything was kind of shut down from a retail standpoint, pretty much, doubled. Yeah. And then our virtual sports, same kind of growth rates. But we had, look, this COVID thing, you can't dismiss the impact on people. I mean, I have 1,350 employees, 1,100 of which are on furlough right now, because every retail operation we have around the world is shut down. But the UK government has been great with the furlough scheme to make, kind of the employees whole as much as possible. And they've now laid out the scenario under which all the business is going to come back. So betting shops are going to open next month. The pubs and the holiday parks are going to open in May. So there's now, there's a path towards getting back to normalcy. But you're spot on. I mean, probably like everybody, the online part of our business grew dramatically, and I'm sure it will drop back down a little bit when retail comes back, but it's never going to go back down to where it was, in large part because our guys are making great games. Yeah. And there is that component of, I mean, everyone is probably an overused phrase, but this omni-channel strategy. So just for example, in Greece, we're the largest supplier of gaming machines in Greece. And the number one game is ours. And it's now, when we introduced it online, it immediately went to the number one game online in Greece. So
what game is that?
Super Hot Fruits.
Cool.
Don't ask me.
That's okay. Super Hot Fruit. Makes money, we love it.
Super Hot Fruits, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For some reason in Greece, they love the fruit games, but yeah. And it's honestly, it's just like in the States. So now there's, there'll be multiple versions of Super Hot Fruits. It's Super Hot Fruits Jackpot, Super Hot Fruits Bonanza, et cetera, et cetera.
It's funny. There's always a few keywords you throw on the end. It changes up. It's deluxe, bonanza, jackpot. Right now we're in it. Right. So we'll have a link, Super Hot Fruit link soon.
Yeah,
so that's perfect.
Absolutely.
So I got to ask, you mentioned all these European spots, a little off the business topic, but when you go over there, do you have a favorite spot in Europe you like to go? Not office wise, not saying like pick a favorite team, but just in general, like when you're going to Europe, do you have a spot that you're like, oh yeah, I get to go here now?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to limit it to one, but I'll do it differently. So from a city perspective, London is hard to beat. It's easy to navigate, tons of history, very, very cool. And I had to like it because I was going there 2 weeks a month for the last 3 years. So, if you don't like it, it makes for a difficult life. But no, I love it. From a country standpoint, Italy is. I've never heard anybody ever go to Italy and have a bad time.
Sure.
So the food's great, the people are great, the culture's great, the scenery's great. So yeah, I mean it's nice when you live there and when you can be from my flat in London, I could be, in Rome in, 2.5 hours. So it's kind of cool.
You can get from London to Rome faster than I can get from Vegas to Landon's house. I mean, I guess if I flew, it's different, but like driving wise, it's not that bad. And I only have thanks for that. Yeah, I'm one of the pent up guys.
Nice parts of obviously Europe from the geography standpoint is it's easy to hop around.
Perfect. Yeah, I was gonna say I'm one of the guys that's just planning his travel. Once they let me out of the box, I'm like, all right, I gotta go hit Italy or figure it all out. So no, it's exciting.
Well, have you ever been to Italy?
Not to Europe at all. So I've been all over South America, South Africa, Australia. So I kind of went the other hemisphere as my exploration. And then I'm just like, I told my wife, I said, we're gonna have to plan like a month-long Europe trip just to hit all these spots. And I don't know when we're gonna have time for it, but we'll fit it in.
I strongly suggest spending some time in Italy.
Yeah.
You'll love it.
Can you put your time off request through MaxBet so we know when you're going to be gone? That'd be great.
I'll just bring the mic with me. We'll do some European interviews. We love our friends over there. So.
I was going to say my non-business question is did you buy a roller coaster? Because I'm still on this roller coaster. Being able to buy a roller coaster, I mean, that's wild.
No, we did not buy a roller coaster, but we did. But it's kind of like G2E of that space. You go there, and in that circumstance, where most of my life I've been the seller. In that circumstance, I'm the buyer. So, you walk around and you have to compare, air hockey games to, the little basketball games. But the cool stuff is the virtual reality stuff. I mean, it's amazing when you get on some of these games. And I have to say, from a business perspective, the earning power of those is dramatically higher. You can make a lot more money in VR technology than you can on kids shooting hoops.
Yeah. So this is very interesting. And I've brought this up, sorry, Mike, on multiple podcasts. Do you ever think that the virtual reality world and gaming merge?
Yeah. I mean, so when and I'm sure you guys have done it, AGS, I know Side Games did it, and Aristocrat did it, the kind of like go back behind the curtain and see the new technology stuff. So we did at Aristocrat, we did a game. I think I can say this because they never commercialized the game, but we did a game where you'd go back and you literally had on virtual reality like goggles, and you had like basically made it feel like you were shooting a bow and arrow, and that's what you were shooting as in the bonus feature. You were actually firing at stuff to be able to hit certain parts of the bonus feature, which I always thought was cool. Now I don't know in terms of machine occupancy and whether all that, I'm kind of a little out of touch with the big Class 3 casino stuff. But yeah, I mean, do I think that at some point there's going to be some kind of mechanics that could involve, VR? Yeah, I mean, I do actually.
Wow.
That's fascinating, especially if you do it at home. Like the one thing I was going to say about you touring the floor on VR, you got to have your guy next to you going, hey, no pictures of the boss while he's monkeying around on his VR. Because I always feel like whenever I watch somebody do VR, I'm like, you look like a complete idiot. I'm sure you're having the time of your life, but to me, because I can't see what you see, it looks just funny.
Well, think about it. I mean, think about all the gyrations, plus you're wearing these goggles that just make you look like an alien. So yeah, it's a bad.
You're shooting a virtual bow, so your hands are doing crazy things. I mean, you never know what's going on. So to you, it makes perfect sense. Like you're on the hunt, but to us, we're like, what the hell's he doing? So that's why it's my favorite part.
It's not a good look. It's not a good look for anybody. I'll tell you.
Especially when you're the buyer and the boss. You go, hey, but no photos. You got to clean them all up before I come in. That's hilarious.
That's true.
So shifting back a little to the serious side, one other thing that surprised me is you guys have over 50,000 gaming machines in the field. I'm assuming that's mostly UK. And is that kind of back to that Novomatic purchase that you did? Were there, you kind of were you always there?
Yeah, that's where we were. So we probably have, if you break it down, Novomatic was part of that. So probably 35,000 in the UK, probably 10,000 or so in Greece, another 5,000 in Italy. Look, I know this venue is not for anybody to be touting their company and, we did this and we did that. But, for us, for example, in Greece, I always thought that this was the kind of fairest way to compare. So they did an RFP. It was OPAP, so the big Greek privatized lottery. So they did an RFP, and basically they picked 4 suppliers, of which we were one. I'll name the others because it's not a big deal. It's all public information. So a smaller company called Synot, and then IGT and Side Games. Yeah. So the 4 of us were the 4 people that got to put machines in. So you basically put machines in, and kind of everybody was side by side. Everybody went in on the same day. Everybody got the same number of machines. And then they determined what they would order in the future based purely on performance. And, we're, fighting against the kind of IGTs inside games of the world. They got far bigger capabilities. I mean, their R&D budgets are bigger than our revenue.
Right.
But our games, did amazingly well. And we're now kind of double the size of anybody else in Greece, purely on performance. So yeah, I mean, if you kind of make great product and it appeals, you can get some traction. And for us, pretty much everything we do until we came into North America, I'm sure at some point we'll talk about our gaming machine business in North America, but everything we did is on recurring revenue. So we install it all for, a percentage of the handle, just like participation in the US, but pretty much everything we did is that way. So so it's from a business perspective, when there's no COVID, you pretty much know what your revenue, you can go to sleep at night feeling comfortable. You got 50,000 machines generating cash for you by the next morning.
Yeah, that does not suck. That's a good way to sleep. So you mentioned North America. So you're coming over, you talked about it with virtual sports is starting in PA and here in Nevada and others. Land-based side, I know I saw something about you guys are in the Illinois VLT market, which seems very similar to the Greek European pub network route type deal. Exactly. Are you also in casinos, or is your focus for North America the pub route style first?
Yeah. So no, you're spot on. So the market that we've targeted is, again, I don't know, the route market, street market, distributed gaming market, whatever you want to call it. Because when you're going to a place where there's kind of 4 or 5 machines in a location. So in Illinois, you can now you have 6 machines in a location, but it's bars, cafes, pizza parlors, restaurants. That's the world that we're used to. And having the ability, it's in Illinois, it's all G2S. So it is downloadable. So we can change games on the fly. So it's the world that we knew and the world that we're, very well versed in. So we basically, very similar to what we did in Greece, we basically flew game designers and made them spend a year in Illinois watching players, talking to players, playing games themselves, and designed our games around it. It worked for us in Greece, and thus far it's worked for us in Illinois. We're getting some traction there. But we're competing against the big boys. I mean, iGaming and IGT pretty much own or did own the Illinois market. So we're getting some traction, and our games are, kind of number 1 or number 2 in every venue where we go. But so we'll be targeting, and again, this is all public information. We haven't been shy about it. We'll be our second market was Western Canada, WCLC. So, those are the kind of markets we're going to go in, but if everything were to work out and we get enough scale and traction, would we at some point want to go into the class 3 space? Yeah, but probably, principally on a multi-game. I don't see us doing like a Britney Spears. But that's okay. Fair enough, whether it's Aristocrat, IGT side games, you guys, I think there's space for us.
Sure. Yeah.
So outside of the virtual sports betting and marketing, what are you most excited about that you guys are working on?
So I think, again, this is a thesis, and we believe it, and other people will or won't. For us, North America really is the key market, but it's nice because it's the key market in every one of our verticals. So, I've kind of laid out what I think we'll be doing in terms of the gaming machine business. Clearly virtual sports, tagging along with sports betting, we think is that's a good wave to ride. And I strongly believe iGaming is going to be the next wave. I just saw today about the Venetian and Palazzo getting sold, and Rob Goldstein talking about they're looking at their strategy for iGaming, which years and years ago Sheldon was completely against online gaming. So the world has kind of shifted, and I think with COVID and the states being under as much pressure as they're under for tax revenue, I think distributed gaming, where you don't have to build gigantic casinos, is going to be the wave of the future. And I think online for that and distributed gaming is the space where there's going to be growth. And that's the space that we know best and we play in.
It's wild.
Yeah, I agree about online. I mean, I think that's that jumped out to me too, by the way, because I spent some time in interactive with Bally for a while, and it was always like, hey, Sands is going to be the opposition representative on the panel. They're the ones that doesn't want it. They're funding the anti-legislation. So for them to say that, I was like, whoa, that's, that tells you where the world is going, right? Because they're going to have $6 billion in their pocket and see what they do with it.
Yeah, well, this is going to sound like a weird statement, but everybody's against it until they're for it.
Makes sense, yeah.
It's kind of like sports betting. If you remember, everybody was kind of like, oh, well, sports betting is not meaningful to us. It doesn't really contribute. It's kind of a lost leader. Now sports betting, is the absolute rage for every company in the gaming space. So, yeah, I mean, you look at the numbers, you guys, I'm sure look at it. You look at the numbers coming out of New Jersey, coming out of Pennsylvania, coming out of Michigan. I mean, states can't look at that and say, wow, there's not a market here. So it looks like Connecticut may go here shortly. I would assume Illinois will go. And these things, they kind of fall like dominoes. So that's kind of where we're headed.
Yeah. Start needing a little tax revenue. You start getting in bed with new partners going, hey, how do we pay for schools? Well, let's let them bet on sports. It'll be easy enough to do so.
I mean, that's the reality of it. I think you're right.
A question I do have for you is, what do you think that does to brick and mortar? Because so right now, are we oversaturated with casinos just opening up all over the country, and with online gaming, online casino, virtual sports betting? Do you think that in the long term starts to deplete the brick and mortar business, or does it expand?
Our experience says no. We've seen that making the product, easier and more accessible for people doesn't mean that they stop going to, because there's some experience of gaming that you just can't replicate sitting there on your phone.
Right.
So sure, I think when the world comes back to, a bit more normal with COVID, do I think Vegas is never going to come back? No, I definitely think Vegas is going to come back. I mean, there's just stuff about Vegas that you're not getting the same experience that you get playing, online.
Right.
But having the ability to have it when you go back to, if you go to Vegas for a weekend and you go back to your place and you want to play games, and it's maybe not convenient for you to go to a casino that night, having access to it, I think is good for the industry.
Yeah.
Agree. So Brooks, it's been fun chopping it up, bud. So we have a couple questions we ask everybody. So one, I love that you grew up in the biz. I mean, it's so cool to think, following your dad's footsteps and kind of coming into, I don't know, he could have ever pictured what it is now, but just looking at, the early days and when you moved over. So I'm interested. Do you have a gambling story? Like when you think back, I think you said 25, 30 years in the biz, looking back, oh man, I had fun gambling. And this is like my go-to fun moment when you as yourself were gambling.
Well, it's sort of. And it's weird. It's a family connection. So when I moved to Vegas, so I moved like kind of at the end of May, in like 2015. So I'm living, by myself in Trump Towers, working my ass off, kind of feeling sorry for myself. So it was like the middle of June is when Father's Day is. So my son decided to come out and visit, and he had never been to Vegas. So like, when you're 23 or 24, having your dad be in the gaming industry, living in Vegas is kind of cool.
Yeah, sure.
So he came out, and so I said, well, have you ever even been to a casino? And he's like, Dad, I'm only like 22 or 23, whatever he was. He's like, no, I've never been. I said, well, tonight's your lucky night. So we walked down, and so I showed him like what we did with slot machines, and so he did that for a while, but you could tell it kind of didn't really fully engage him. And I said, well, I got a game for you that I think you might like. And he's like, what? And I said, well, craps. And he said, what's craps? So I said, well, here, look, let's go over to an electronic game. I'm going to teach you the basic mechanics of how you play. So, we played for an hour. So he started to understand how it went. So I said, all right, I think you're ready for the next level of education. Let's go to the table. So we went to, I think we were playing the electronic stuff, maybe at like Venetian or Palazzo. And I said, let's go over to Win. So we went over to Win, and he's 22 or 23, didn't have any money at the time. So I said, look, here's $100. Let's find a table. It's like $15. Let's play until, we play it out.
Yeah.
So we played for a little bit, and then he was down to like, $15, and he had like, one more roll. And this, I remember this woman distinctly, this South American woman, got at the head of the table and just got on a roll, like one of the classics. So like all of a sudden his, like, he was down to 15 of the $100 I gave him. And within like, 10 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever, he was like up 1,000. I said, nice. All right, well, time to go. And so by this time it was probably like 3:00 in the morning. And so I'm walking back from, Wynn at 3:00 in the morning with my son to Trump.
Yeah.
And he's like, Dad, like, what time are we going tomorrow? Like, no, hold on. This is not how it always turns out.
Yeah.
Usually it's much more likely that you're giving 100 than you're taking 1,000. Yeah. But you know what? For your first experience in a casino and seeing that in a business, that I've been in for my, most of my professional life, seeing it from kind of a novice neophyte and seeing how, just kind of like grab their attention. I don't know. I thought it was cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Big life lesson. Cash out is the lesson there. Always cash out.
You can go back, but take 70% of that not and hide it in your shoe. Don't put it with you.
Yeah, I have a bad feeling if he had stayed, that 1,000 would have gone right back down to 15. But
quickly, yeah,
we've all been there.
We got out.
Yeah,
and as is typical with the kid, he took the full 1,000. He didn't even give me back the 100. I staked him.
It's like, well, it was my birthday, so thanks for that. Yeah, exactly.
Well, the last question we ask Brooks is, it's the max bet challenge. So if you've been watching our episodes, and if you would like to see anyone or us interview anyone, this is your opportunity to call them out. And then Mike and I try to chase them down. So
yeah,
we always say bonus points if you know them.
Yeah, exactly. Bonus points. How about if I give you 2?
Yeah.
If that's okay. So both of them are former colleagues at WMS who have now gone on to other companies. But I think they would bring an interesting perspective in 2 different ways. So you probably know these guys. Do you know Dean Ehrlich?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Dean, he's been around for a long time. He's been in the business a long time. At WMS, obviously, Every's, gained some momentum, and he's kind of right in the middle of it. And he's, an interesting guy, fun guy to talk to. And do you know Alon Engelman?
I know Alon. I haven't talked to him in quite a while, but we overlapped briefly at when we were at iGaming.
Yeah, so I recruited Alon to Aristocrat when I was there, and he ran all of the iGaming technology business.
Yep.
And he came back to Aristocrat for 2 reasons. One is he wanted to go back just purely into kind of game design. And 2, as you guys would know, if you make it in game design at Aristocrat, you can make a lot of money.
Yeah.
So he's motivated by game design and money, and he's Australian, and he's been around. I think either one of those guys, I think you guys would hit it off.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Great.
Yeah. I've briefly worked with both of them, so I at least have a baseline there. So that's great. Love that. Love that call out. And thanks for joining us, brother. This has been fun.
You.
We appreciate making the time, and I look forward to the day we can do pub style celebrations instead of just being virtual. But
here's the deal. Next time I'm out, when Landon's in Vegas, next time I'm out in Vegas, you entertain me in Vegas, and I'll get you over to London and entertain you over there. And we'll
That's
see.
An easy deal.
We'll see who rolls best in what country.
Challenging. Yeah, that's good. We'll go. It's probably likely that we'll go first, but yeah, we're in. Let's do it.
That's cool.
Blast.
Awesome, Brooks. Thank you.
All right. Enjoyed it.